She had been warned, never trust an Apache. But what would you do if one appeared on your land with a baby in his arms? And a note that says, "She belongs with you"? What happens next challenges everything Sarah believed, and it may just change her life forever. Thank you so much for watching and for all your comments. Let me know at the end if you liked this story, and where you're watching from and why you're following this. Sarah Miller wiped the sweat from her brow as the Arizona sun beat down mercilessly on her small homestead. 2 years ago, she had left Boston following her husband's death, determined to forge a new life in the frontier. The locals had warned her a woman alone had no business settling so close to Apache territory. But the 30-year-old widow was stubborn, and this patch of land with its small creek was the only thing she could afford. "Miss Miller, you sure you don't want me to stay a bit longer?" young Tommy Jenkins asked, loading the last supplies onto his wagon. The 16-year-old boy from town often helped with heavier chores. "I'll be fine, Tommy. You best get back before dark. Your mother will worry." Sarah handed him a small bundle. "Some fresh bread for your family." As Tommy's wagon disappeared down the dusty trail, Sarah sighed. The townspeople meant well, but their constant warnings about the Apache made her uneasy. Sheriff Davis had just last week recounted another raid on a homestead 20 miles south. "Never trust an Apache, Mrs. Miller," he'd said gravely. "They're savages, the lot of them." Sarah wasn't one to judge people she hadn't met, but isolation had a way of feeding fear. Each night, she checked her rifle before sleeping, the weapon a constant companion since moving west. After finishing her evening chores, Sarah settled on her small porch, watching the sunset paint the desert in gold and crimson. The stillness was broken only by distant coyote calls. This solitude was both blessing and curse, freedom from society's constraints, but loneliness that sometimes threatened to consume her. Her thoughts drifted to her husband James. He would have loved this wild country. Their dream had been to move west together, but pneumonia had taken him suddenly, leaving Sarah to pursue their vision alone. Sometimes she wondered if she'd made the right choice. A sudden noise jerked her from her reverie, a rustling from the brush near her vegetable garden. Sarah froze, her heart pounding. Slowly, she reached for the rifle propped against the porch. "Raylene, who's there?" she called, her voice steadier than she felt. No answer came, but the rustling continued. Sarah stood, raising her rifle. "I'm armed. Show yourself." The brush parted, and a figure emerged, tall, copper-skinned, dressed in buckskin. An Apache man stood at the edge of her property. Sarah's finger hovered over the trigger, but something stopped her from firing. The man carried a bundle in his arms and showed no weapons. He took a cautious step forward, then another. Sarah kept her rifle raised. "That's far enough," she warned. The Apache stopped, regarding her with dark, solemn eyes. Then he looked down at the bundle in his arms. With deliberate movements, he knelt and placed it gently on the ground, unwrapping it slightly. Sarah gasped. Inside was a baby, a little girl with dark hair and coppery skin, sleeping peacefully. The Apache man placed something else beside the bundle, a folded piece of paper, then backed away, his eyes never leaving Sarah's. "Wait," Sarah called, confusion overriding fear. "What is this? Why are you leaving a child?" The man paused, his expression pained. In halting English, he said, "She belongs with you. Not safe with us. Enemy tribes, soldiers." He gestured toward the note. "Read." Before Sarah could respond, he melted back into the growing darkness. Keeping her rifle ready, Sarah approached the bundle cautiously. The baby stirred but didn't wake. Sarah picked up the note with trembling fingers. In careful, if somewhat awkward script, it read, "This child is named Morning Star. Her mother was my sister. She died. The child is half white. Her father was a trader who died in raid. She not safe with Apache now. Army hunting us. Other tribes also. You good woman. I watch you. You kinda land. Kind to Jenkins, boy. Morning Star belongs with you. Sarah stared at the sleeping infant, her mind reeling. This can't be happening, she whispered. Yet the warm weight of the baby was undeniably real. She glanced nervously at the darkening landscape. What if this was a trap? The townspeople's warnings echoed in her mind. Never trust an Apache. But as the baby stirred and opened her eyes, dark, intelligent eyes that seemed to look straight into Sarah's soul, something shifted in her heart. Morning Star, she whispered, testing the name. The baby gurgled, tiny fingers reaching up. Sarah made her decision. She gathered the child in her arms and hurried inside, bolting the door behind her. Whatever happened next, she couldn't leave an innocent baby outside in the desert night. What am I going to do with you? She asked the infant, who merely yawned in response. Sarah had no experience with children, having lost her own baby during pregnancy before James died. That night, Sarah barely slept, keeping watch with her rifle. Across her lap, the baby nestled in a makeshift cradle beside her. When morning came without incident, she began to wonder if perhaps the Apache man's intentions had been genuine after all. As Morning Star's eyes followed her movements around the cabin, Sarah felt a long-dormant maternal instinct stirring. "I suppose we'll figure this out together," she told the child, surprising herself with the decision that was forming in her heart. 3 days passed, and Sarah found herself falling into an unexpected rhythm with the baby. Morning Star was alert and surprisingly content, rarely crying except when hungry or wet. Sarah had fashioned diapers from old linens and was feeding. Her goat's milk warmed with a drop of honey. "We need to go into town," Sarah told the baby as she wrapped her in a soft blanket. "People will talk, but they'll talk more if I hide you away." Sarah had spent those 3 days watching the surrounding landscape, half expecting the Apache man to return, or, worse, a war party to descend on her homestead. But only the usual desert creatures visited: lizards sunning themselves on rocks, a family of quail parading through her garden, coyotes calling in the distance. Sarah hitched her horse to the small wagon and carefully secured Morning Star in a basket padded with blankets. "Ready for your first adventure, little one?" The baby gurgled, waving tiny fists. The 7-mile journey to Cottonwood Springs passed without incident, though Sarah kept her rifle close. As she pulled into town, she felt the weight of curious stares. Widow Miller rarely came to town except for monthly supplies, and never with a baby basket. She tied her horse outside the general store and lifted Morning Star, holding her close. Taking a deep breath, she pushed through the door. Mr. Abernathy, the storekeeper, dropped the can he was stacking. "Mrs. Miller, I didn't expect... Is that a baby?" Sarah straightened her shoulders. "Yes, Mr. Abernathy. This is Morning Star. I need some supplies for her, cloth for diapers, a proper feeding bottle if you have one." "Morning Star?" His bushy eyebrows rose nearly to his hairline. "That's a... unusual name." "It suits her," Sarah replied simply, meeting his gaze steadily. As she gathered supplies, whispers followed her through the store. Mrs. Jenkins, Tommy's mother, approached cautiously. "Sarah, dear," she began, her voice honey-sweet but eyes sharp. "With curiosity, Tommy didn't mention you had... company." "It happened suddenly," Sarah replied, unwilling to elaborate further. "And the child's origins?" Mrs. Jenkins pressed, peering at Morning Star's copper skin. Sarah felt a surge of protectiveness. She needed a home. "I have one." The store had grown quiet, everyone straining to hear their conversation. Sheriff Davis pushed through the crowd, his weathered face set in a frown. "Mrs. Miller," he said, tipping his hat, "may I have a word?" In his office adjacent to the store, Sheriff Davis wasted no time. "Where did you get that Indian baby, Mrs. Miller?" Sarah considered lying but decided against it. This would come out. "Eventually, she was left at my door by an Apache man." The sheriff's face hardened. "Left Or did they take her from somewhere? There've been reports of a raid near Fort Griffin last week. She wasn't taken, Sarah said firmly. She's half white. Her mother was Apache, her father a trader. Both dead. Her uncle brought her to me because she wasn't safe with them. And, you believe this story? The sheriff shook his head. Mrs. Miller, these people are savages. They lie as easily as they breathe. Sarah felt her temper rising. This baby needed help. I gave it. That's all there is to it. That's not all, the sheriff countered. That Apache who came to your door, he was scouting. Seeing if you're alone, vulnerable. They could come back. Anytime. He could have attacked then if that was his intention. I was alone, surprised. Sheriff Davis sighed heavily. I can't force you, but I strongly suggest you take this child to the mission in Tucson. The nuns there handle ... These situations. These situations? Sarah echoed coldly. Half-breed orphans, he clarified. They find proper Christian homes for them, away from their savage heritage. Morning Star stirred against Sarah's chest, small, fingers gripping her dress. In just 3 days, this tiny person had awakened something in Sarah she thought had died with her husband: purpose, connection, even joy. Thank you for your concern, Sheriff, she said, rising. But I've made my decision. Morning Star stays with me. Outside, Sarah found Tommy Jenkins waiting by her wagon. Miss Miller, he said hesitantly, folks are saying all sorts of things. That the Apache left you a baby, that they might come back, ... Quote Sarah, sighed. People talk, Tommy. I could come stay at your place, he offered earnestly. Pa says I'm a good shot now, the offer touched her. That's kind, but unnecessary. I don't believe I'm in any danger. But if that Apache comes back, then I'll handle it, Sarah said firmly. Morning Star is my responsibility now. As she drove home, Sarah couldn't shake the sheriff's warnings. What if he was right? What if the baby was bait in some larger scheme? But when she looked down at Morning Star sleeping peacefully in her basket, such fears seemed unfounded. That night, after settling the baby in her improvised cradle, Sarah took her rifle and walked the perimeter of her property. The desert was quiet, bathed in silver moonlight. She sensed no danger, no watching eyes. Yet as she turned to go inside, a glint of light caught her attention from the ridge overlooking her homestead. For a brief moment, she thought she saw a figure tall, straight-backed, watching over them. When she blinked, it was gone. Instead of fear, Sarah felt an odd sense of reassurance. If the Apache man was watching, it wasn't to harm them, but to ensure Morning Star's safety. Back inside, she checked on the sleeping baby. Your uncle is still looking out for you, she whispered. And so am I, little one. So am I. 2 weeks later, Sarah woke to Morning Star's hungry cries just before dawn. As she prepared the baby's morning bottle, a knock at her door startled her. No one visited this early, especially not with tensions running high about her new charge. Who is it? She called, reaching for her rifle. Army Patrol, ma'am. Lieutenant James Cooper. Need to speak with you. Sarah settled Morning Star in her cradle and straightened her nightdress before opening the door. 3 soldiers on horseback waited. Outside, the lieutenant dismounting as she appeared. Mrs. Miller? He asked, removing his hat. He was younger than she'd expected, perhaps 30, with keen blue eyes and a dust-covered uniform. Yes, what brings the Army to my door at daybreak, Lieutenant? Reports of Apache activity in the area. Sheriff Davis mentioned you had ... an encounter. Sarah frowned. Of course the sheriff had reported her situation. One man came to my property 2 weeks ago. He left, causing no trouble. He left something behind, untold, the lieutenant said carefully. As if on cue, Morning Star let out a cry from inside. Sarah sighed. A baby. Her name is Morning Star. Her parents are dead. May I? Lieutenant Cooper gestured toward the door. Reluctantly, Sarah let him inside. The other soldiers remained mounted, watching the surrounding desert. The lieutenant's expression softened as he observed the infant. Half-breed. She's a child, Sarah corrected sharply. Not a breed of any kind. Lieutenant Cooper had the grace to look abashed. Forgive me, ma'am. Military language becomes habit. He cleared his throat. The Apache who brought her, did he give any indication of his band? We're tracking Najose's group after a raid on a cavalry outpost. He didn't give a name, Sarah said truthfully. He spoke little English. The lieutenant nodded, studying her face as if searching for deception. Mrs. Miller, I must warn you, harboring this child could put you at risk. Not just from the Apache, who might return, but from others who wouldn't look kindly on. He trailed off. On a white woman raising an Indian baby? Sarah finished for him. Yes, these are complicated times. Morning Star began fussing again, and Sarah moved to pick her up. The natural way she settled the baby against her shoulder wasn't lost on the lieutenant. You've grown attached, he observed. She needs someone. I'm here. Lieutenant Cooper watched them for a moment. The army is establishing a larger presence nearby. Fort Bennett is being expanded, and patrols will increase. I'll make sure they include your homestead in their routes. That's not necessary, Sarah began. It's not a request, ma'am. There's been an increase in raiding parties. The drought has pushed bands further into settled areas looking for food, horses, weapons. He hesitated. If the man who brought this child returns, or if you see any Apache activity, you must report it immediately. And if I don't, his expression hardened slightly, then you could be charged with aiding hostiles. The child would be removed to the mission. After the soldiers departed, Sarah sat on her porch, Morning Star sleeping against her chest, and watched the dust from their horses settle on the trail. The lieutenant's warning echoed in her mind. She'd known taking in Morning Star would complicate her life, but she hadn't fully appreciated how it would place her between two worlds, both potentially hostile. Later that afternoon, Tommy Jenkins arrived with his father's wagon loaded with lumber. Pa sent me to help fix your roof before monsoon season, he explained, unloading planks, and to check on you after them soldiers came by. News traveled fast in Cottonwood Springs. That's kind of your father, Sarah said. As they worked on the roof, Tommy kept glancing toward the surrounding hills. You ever see him again, the Apache who brought the baby? Sarah considered how to answer. No, she said finally. It wasn't exactly a lie. She hadn't seen him clearly that night on the ridge. Sheriff says they'll take the baby away if they think you're friendly with Indians, Tommy said quietly. Says it ain't proper for a white woman to raise an Apache child. Sarah's hands stilled on the roof beam. Do you think that, Tommy? The boy flushed. No, ma'am. My grandma was 1/4 Cherokee. Don't tell nobody, though. Hud doesn't like to speak of it. This revelation surprised Sarah. Tommy, with his fair hair and freckles, showed no obvious signs of native heritage. How many others in town held similar secrets? That evening after Tommy left, Sarah bathed Morning Star in a small tub, marveling at how the baby had already grown in the short time they'd been together. Her dark eyes followed Sarah's movements with increasing awareness, and her grip had strengthened considerably. What am I going to do with you, little star? Sarah whispered, wrapping the baby in a towel. It seems the whole world has opinions about where you belong. As darkness fell, Sarah performed her nightly ritual of checking the property before locking up. In the distance, coyotes howled, and the wind whispered through the cottonwood trees by the creek. She was about to turn back when she spotted something on her porch that hadn't been there. Earlier, a small bundle wrapped in buckskin. Sarah approached cautiously, rifle ready. Inside the bundle, she found dried berries, a small pouch of medicinal herbs she recognized from a local healer's shop, and an intricately carved wooden rattle. No note accompanied these gifts, but their meaning was clear. The Apache man was still watching. Still concerned for Morningstar's welfare. Sarah looked out into the darkness. "Thank you," she called softly, knowing he might be listening. "She's growing strong. I'm taking good care of her." Only the desert wind answered, but Sarah felt an unexpected sense of partnership with this unseen guardian. They were both protecting Morningstar in their own ways. Inside, she showed the rattle to the baby, who grasped it immediately, eyes widening at the soft sound it made. "A gift from your people," Sarah told her. "So you'll remember where you came from, even as you make your home with me." That night, Sarah dreamed of two paths stretching before Morningstar, one leading to the white settlement, the other to the Apache Mountains. In the dream, the child stood at the crossroads, unable to choose. Sarah woke with tears on her cheeks and a renewed determination to somehow give Morningstar both worlds, not force her to choose between them. The summer heat intensified as July gave way to August. Morningstar was thriving under Sarah's care, growing plumper and more alert by the day. The gifts from her unseen Apache guardian continued to appear periodically: medicinal plants, dried meat, once even a small pair of beautifully beaded moccasins that would fit the baby when she began to walk. Sarah found herself looking forward to these silent exchanges, sometimes leaving bundles of her own fresh bread, vegetables from her garden, once a small hand-sewn dress she'd made for Morningstar. These offerings always disappeared by morning, though Sarah never managed to catch sight of who took them. The townsfolk's attitudes remained mixed. Some, like Tommy's family, had softened toward the situation, with Mrs. Jenkins even bringing by a wooden cradle her own children had outgrown. Others maintained a cool distance, whispering behind Sarah's back when she brought Morningstar to town. Sheriff Davis remained openly disapproving. "This can't continue indefinitely, Mrs. Miller," he warned during one of her supply runs. "Lieutenant Cooper tells me his patrols have spotted a Apache sign near your property." "Perhaps they're just passing through," Sarah suggested mildly. "Or perhaps they're watching, waiting for the right moment to strike. You're putting yourself at risk, and the whole settlement by extension." Sarah bit back a sharp retort. Arguing would only harden his position. "I appreciate your concern, Sheriff. Now, if you'll excuse me, we need to head home before the afternoon heat." As she drove her wagon out of town, Sarah noticed dark clouds building over the mountains to the east. The monsoon storms were finally arriving after weeks of punishing heat. By the time she reached her homestead, the sky had darkened ominously, and the air felt heavy with impending rain. She hurried to secure her animals and garden against the coming storm, then brought Morningstar inside just as the first fat raindrops began to fall. Within minutes, the gentle shower transformed into a deluge, rain pounding on the roof while lightning split the sky and thunder shook the small cabin. Morningstar, usually so calm, began wailing in fright at each thunderclap. Sarah paced the floor with her, humming soothingly. "It's just the sky spirits having a conversation," she told the baby, borrowing a phrase she'd once heard from a native woman in town. "Nothing to fear, little one." As darkness fell, the storm intensified. Sarah lit lanterns and checked that her roof repairs were holding. The nearby creek would rise with the runoff from the mountains, but her cabin sat on higher ground, safe from flooding. A particularly violent gust of wind rattled the windows, and Morningstar whimpered against Sarah's shoulder. Then, barely audible beneath the storm's fury, came another sound, a knock at her door. Sarah froze, listening. It came again, more insistent. "Who's there?" she called, shifting Morningstar to one arm and reaching for her rifle with the other. "Help," came a weak voice. "Please." Cautiously, Sarah approached the door, rifle ready. "Identify yourself." "It's Lieutenant Cooper," came the reply, followed by a pained cough. "Been injured. Horse spooked in the storm." Sarah unbolted the door, to find the lieutenant leaning heavily against her porch rail, uniform torn and bloody, face pale beneath streaks of mud. She quickly helped him inside, setting aside her rifle to support his weight. "What happened?" she asked, settling him in a chair while keeping Morningstar balanced on her hip. "Patrol got separated in the storm," he explained between labored breaths. "My horse threw me when lightning struck nearby. Think I've broken some ribs." "Saw your light." Sarah laid Morningstar in her cradle and turned her attention to the injured man. "Let me see." She helped him remove his sodden jacket, wincing at the bruising already visible through his torn shirt. "You're lucky it's just ribs," she said after examining him. "Though you might have a concussion as well from that gash on your head." As she cleaned and bandaged his wounds, Lieutenant Cooper watched her with curious eyes. "You've done this before." "My husband taught me. He was a doctor in Boston." Sarah wrung out a cloth and warm water. "Hold this to your head." The bleedings mostly stopped. Outside, the storm continued its assault, rain now coming sideways against the windows. Morningstar had fallen asleep despite the noise, exhausted from her earlier fright. "She seems at home here," the lieutenant observed, nodding toward the sleeping baby. "She is home," Sarah replied simply. Cooper's expression turned thoughtful. "You know, when I first heard about your situation, I thought like the sheriff that you were naive, putting yourself in danger for some misplaced sense of charity." He winced as he shifted in the chair. "But seeing you two together, perhaps I judged too quickly." Sarah handed him a cup of tea steeped with pain-relieving herbs, one of the medicinal mixtures that had appeared in the Apache bundles people often do. "Still," Cooper continued, "you should know there's talk at the fort. Colonel Harrison believes the Apache man who brought you the child is Katane, a subchief known for raiding settlements last year. If it is him, and he's watching your homestead." Sarah's hands stilled. "Does that mean you'll be leading a patrol here to capture him?" Cooper held her gaze. "It would be my duty." A tense silence fell between them, broken only by the storms, rage and Morningstar's soft breathing. "What if," Sarah said carefully, "he's not watching us to plan an attack but to protect his niece, to ensure she's safe and well cared for?" That would be ... double quotes. Cooper seemed to search for words. "Unexpected." "So, is leaving a baby with a white woman instead of another Apache family," Sarah pointed out. "Perhaps there's more to this story than raids and warfare." Before Cooper could respond, a tremendous crash shook the cabin. Both rushed to the window to see that lightning had struck one of the large cottonwood trees by the creek. The tree was now falling, its massive trunk blocking the swollen creek's flow. "That's not good," Cooper said grimly. "The water will back up, possibly flood this whole area." Even as he spoke, Sarah could see the creek water rising, spilling over its banks. "We need to move to higher ground," she decided, already gathering essentials, food, blankets. Her rifle. Cooper tried to rise but faltered, face contorting in pain. "I'll slow you down." "Nonsense, we go together." Sarah wrapped Morningstar snugly, securing her to her chest with a shawl tied crosswise over her shoulders. They stepped out into the storm's fury, the lieutenant leaning heavily on Sarah as they made their way toward the rocky outcropping behind her property. The rising water was already lapping at the cabin's foundation. Halfway to safety, Cooper stumbled, nearly pulling them both down the slippery slope. "Leave me," he gasped. "Get the baby to high ground." "Not happening, Lieutenant," Sarah replied through gritted teeth, struggling to support his weight while keeping Morningstar protected from the rain. Suddenly, a figure materialized from the darkness, tall, powerful, his long hair plastered to his face by the rain. The Apache man stood before them, his expression unreadable as he took in the scene. Sarah struggling with the baby and the injured soldier. Cooper reached for his sidearm, but Sarah stopped him. "No, he's here to help." For a long moment, the Apache man and the lieutenant stared at each other, enemies by definition, now face to face in the middle of a natural disaster. Then the Apache's eyes moved to Morning Star, visible beneath Sarah's protective covering. Something passed between the men, a recognition perhaps of the child that connected them all. Without a word, the Apache moved forward and took Cooper's weight from Sarah, supporting him with surprising gentleness. Together, the unlikely trio made their way to the shelter of an overhanging rock formation, safe from both the rising water and the storm's continuing assault. The Apache helped settle Cooper against the rock wall, then stepped back, his dark eyes fixed on Morning Star. "She is well?" he asked in his halting English. "She's thriving," Sarah answered, unwrapping the baby slightly so he could see her properly. "Thank you for the gifts you've left. The medicines have been especially helpful." The man nodded, then turned to Cooper, who watched him warily. "You are soldier, you hunt my people." "And your people raid settlements," Cooper replied tensely. "Both speak truth," the Apache acknowledged. Then, surprisingly, he sat down across from them. "I am Ketene. Morning Star is my sister's child. Her father was good man, trader who respected. Our ways, both killed in raid not by my band, but Chiricahua wolf from south." He looked at Sarah. "I watched you many days before bringing her, saw kindness in you. Morning Star carries two worlds in her blood, needs to know both." Sarah felt tears stinging her eyes. "I want that for her too." The storm began to ease, the thunder now distant. In the strange calm of their shelter, Ketene continued his story, explaining how his band was caught between aggressive settlers, the army, and other Apache groups who viewed them as too accommodating to the whites. "Cannot keep child safe with us," he finished. "Too much running, fighting. But cannot give to people who will make her forget her mother's blood." Cooper had listened silently. Now he spoke, his voice thoughtful. "There's a new Indian agent at Fort Bennett, man named Richards. He's been pushing for peaceful solutions, education, instead of elimination." He looked at Ketene. "If your band is willing to talk ... Many would not trust such talk," Ketene replied. "Too many broken promises." "I understand that," Cooper acknowledged. "But for Morning Star's sake, for all the children's sake, isn't it worth trying?" As dawn broke, the storm finally passed, leaving a transformed landscape. The creek had carved a new path around the fallen tree, and though Sarah's garden was destroyed, her cabin still stood. The three adults, so different yet now connected by their concern for one small life, watched the sunrise together. Morning Star awoke, reaching curious fingers toward Ketene, who offered her his finger to grasp. "She has strong spirit," he said, pride evident in his voice, "like her mother." Sarah made a decision then. "She should know you," she told Ketene. "Know her people, her history. If Lieutenant Cooper can arrange safe passage, will you visit her? Help me teach her your language, your stories?" Ketene looked to Cooper, who nodded slowly. "I'll speak with Agent Richards. We can arrange something neutral ground, perhaps. And you will not bring soldiers to capture me?" Ketene asked directly. Cooper held his gaze. "You saved my life last night when you could have left me to die. That creates a debt." He extended his hand. "I give you my word." As Ketene clasped the offered hand, Sarah felt a weight lift from her shoulders. The path ahead would not be easy. Prejudice, politics, and history would place obstacles at every turn. But for Morning Star, they would try to bridge the divide between their worlds. "She belongs with both of us," Sarah said softly, looking down at the baby who had brought these unlikely allies together. "With all of us."